Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am here with Kate and I completely forgot to film my November wrap up. It was not on my radar at all that December was even close. And then yesterday was December 1st and I was like, oh my gosh, I have not filmed a wrap up. So this is getting to you a few days late and I'm sorry about that, but we're just gonna go ahead and do what we always do, which is I'll tell you all the books that I read and I'll give you a rating and I'll try and give you a little synopsis, spoiler free. Spoiler free, of course. So I put the books in order of how I read them. But then I have some Kindle books interspersed that I'll just talk about all the Kindle books at the end. First, we have The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. I read this for book club this month. I'm actually in 2 book clubs. One in Birmingham with friends from school. I do not go that often because I don't live in Birmingham anymore, but I try and make it a few times a year. So we read this book for that book club, and we read this book for my book club that I'm in here in Nashville. So it worked out great. But basically, Meg Schaefer, her whole philosophy is that she wants to take books and stories she loved as a child and retell them for adults. And so The Wishing Game is kind of inspired by Willy Wonka. And I thought it was so fun. It definitely felt like a children's book, and I am not mad about that. I ended up giving it 5 stars. I cried, I laughed, it was sweet, and it had all the things that I look for. It just had that 5-star feeling, you know? It had all the things that I look for in a 5-star book, and this is not my typical read, but I'm glad I picked it up. There's a little bit of romance, but basically the main character, Lucy, is trying to adopt this little boy, but she can't. Basically, she doesn't have enough money, she doesn't have a good place to live. All of these things are stacked against her, but because of these books she read as a kid, she's invited to compete in the Wishing Game, where if she wins, she gets basically the only copy in existence of this book, and she can do with it what she wants. So she can sell it to the publisher, she can keep it, whatever, and it is the opportunity for her to kind of get her life back on track so she can adopt this little boy. And that's kind of the premise of this one. So if you're more into the literary fiction genre, then I think this could be up here. Next up, we have Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Of course, you knew this was coming. This came out, when did this come out? At the very beginning of the month. I actually went to a Iron Flame midnight release at Barnes & Noble. I vlogged that week in my life. So if you want to see it, it'll be linked. And I think did a whole vlog where I read this book. So again, watch that if you want to see. But obviously this is 5 stars. Maybe not obviously. Some people did not like this book. It's definitely a lot crammed into this 600 pages. There's a lot of words, there's a lot happening. And as I was reading, I was very unsure about where things were going to go, how it was going to unfold. There's lots of questions from the end of Fourth Wing that I wanted answered, and I didn't feel like I was getting the answers that I wanted in this book. Did I end with those answers? No, I had more questions at the end, but I still think I love these characters and I love this world, and I will obviously continue to read these books as they come out. And because of the way I just love, Violet, I love Xaden, I love all of the supporting characters, Rydok, Sawyer, Rhiannon, like all of them are just such a good cast of characters that I will continue to read these books. I will continue to love these books, and I am excited to see where this series goes. So, with that being said, definitely if you're maybe have never gotten into fantasy before or love fantasy but haven't read these, I don't know who hasn't read these at this point, but I would recommend the whole series. So, Iron Flame. 2 5-star books right at the beginning of the month. Next, we have Next of Kin by Hannah Bonham Young, who wrote, what did she write? Out on a Limb, which I read over the summer and was a 5-star read. This book has already been released, but she's re-releasing it because she got picked up by a publisher, and I got the ARC actually of the re-release. So the book is available, I think. I don't know if you can still buy the old version or if you any of that stuff, because I think they're pulling the old version so they can re-release the new one, which comes out in February. But I really liked Out on a Limb. As I said, it was 5 stars, so I was excited to get this and kind of have some thoughts, because I liked her and I wanted to know if that was just a one-time thing or if it was gonna carry throughout some of her other books. And I like this one too. It wasn't as good as Out on a Limb, I will say that, but the premise is that our 2 main characters, whose names I cannot remember, one of them's name is Connie. No, Connie's the mom. Chloe. The FMC's Chloe, and the MMC's name is Aiden. No, Warren. So we've got Chloe and Warren, and both of them are fostering or trying to foster to adopt their siblings. So Chloe's mom is kind of an absent mom. She was a junkie, and she has another child when Chloe is at this point 22. And so because her mom is not fit to take care of the new baby, Chloe is fostering her, but she doesn't have high enough income for them to approve it on her own. So she basically needs a roommate to help ensure that she can continue to pay her rent. And Warren has a younger brother who is in his teens, like 15, and they also need someone to live with so that they can ensure that they have enough income. So they basically, the Child Protective Services pairs them up and says, y'all can live together, and then kind of that way that the state will understand that you have enough income, whatever. And it goes from there. It's a romance, and the 2 of them are forced proximity. They live together. And that's kind of it. Warren, they both obviously have, like, maybe not obviously, but there's a reason why their parents can't take care of their siblings. So there's definitely some, like, shared trauma of, like, parents, daddy and mommy issues that they get to work through. But needless to say, I did think it was a good book. Let me actually check my Goodreads to verify the rating that I gave it. And of course my Goodreads crashed because the app is horrible. I gave it 3 stars, which is, again, not bad, but it didn't stand out to me as much as Out on a Limb did. So that's Next of Kin. Next, I reread. I have been doing some rereads just because it's gotten to the point of the year. I've met my reading goal and I just want to be cozy and inside. And so that necessitates a reread. And this month I reread Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I love all Emily Henry. You know this. Happy Place came out this year and it was easily 5 stars. All of her books are 5 stars for me, except for People We Meet on Vacation. And I had only read this one time. I have reread Beach Read multiple times, and I had not reread this one yet. So I thought it was time to pick it up and give it the good old reread. And guess what? It was still really good. 5 stars. I love any book about people that love books. It's just the best. So basically, Nora, our FMC, and Charlie Lastra, who might be one of my... Okay, all of Emily Henry's book boyfriends are top tier, so I really can't say that Charlie's my favorite. But like after a reread, I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot how much I love him. But they both work in publishing. Nora's an agent and Charlie is an editor. And they kind of have like an enemies to lovers trope, but also I don't know if Charlie ever like hated her, you know, it's like she thought they were enemies but he was like no kind of thing. But it's kind of like playing on the tropes of a Hallmark movie, which I love. She and her sister go on this like vacation to the small town where Charlie lives. So it's like giving that like big city girl goes to small town kind of vibes, but they're actually both big city people because he's also from New York, but he's just back home helping his parents out. So they kind of like start up a relationship there. But there's issues, and I'm obviously not going to get into them. If you have not read this book, you definitely should. This is 5 stars. Next, this is when I start to go down a fantasy rabbit hole. Next, I read The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levensteller. She also wrote Daughter of the Pirate King and that whole series, which I reread Daughter of the Pirate King for my rereading old 5-star books to see if they're still 5 stars video, and I love that book. I love that series, and so I saw this at Barnes & Noble. It's kind of a new-ish release, and I hadn't really seen anything about it, but it was on like a staffer's pick display, and so I was like, sure, I'll try it. It's the first in a series. The second one has not come out yet, but the premise is that our FMC is going to seduce the king, marry the king, kill him, and take over the kingdom. That's her plan. And so that's kind of what we follow. We follow her, go to the king, go to like a ball, grab the king's attention, and watch it play out. But obviously things don't go according to plan. The kind of obviously it's kings and queens, but the fantastical element is that the king has like shadow powers, and only people like once he touches someone, then the shadows like don't work in their presence. But so he basically has this rule where no one can touch him, because once they touch him, then he's vulnerable. But if people don't touch him, then he can stay in like this shadow like body, and then nothing can harm him. So that's kind of the twist in it, is that he doesn't let anyone touch him, because then he can't be killed because he's in his shadow form. So I guess I was about to put the book down, but I did not give a rating, and I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I do think it's definitely YA. It's very short and an easy read. It could have been a little bit more maybe, but all in all, I enjoyed this, and I will read the second book in this. Next, we have Crescent City 1 and 2 House of Earth and Blood, and House of Sky and Breath. I read these for a video. Again, if you haven't seen that video, watch it because I talk all about the books, and it is spoiler free. And again, it's just, there's so much in these books. I don't feel like I can really do justice of just like giving a synopsis here, but I have now caught fully up on the whole SJM universe. I've read all of ACOTAR, I've read Throne of Glass, and now I have read all of the Crescent City books in preparation for Crescent City 3 coming out in January. And then obviously ACOTAR is not complete yet, so we will get a few more books hopefully, or at least one other book in that series. But for now I'm caught up on the SJM universe, and these are both 5 stars. These are both so good. I'm gonna get that out of the way first. I think SJM is such a talented author, and if you are interested in fantasy, if you like fantasy, if you've read ACOTAR but you're like, I don't know if I'll like her other stuff, you will. They're so good. ACOTAR I feel like is the gateway that a lot of people read, but Throne of Glass is top tier, and so is this. I do think I saw some things that helped me understand and get through the first book. In the first book, don't think too hard about the fantasy world. It's confusing, and it's much different than either of her other like fantasy worlds. It's like modern. There's phones, there's guns. It's not like swords and scrolls. It's modern. And the fantasy world is more complex and confusing. The different types of fae and the different types of characters are more complex and different and like overlap more, and if you think too hard about it at the beginning, you will be confused and you will hate it. I think you should just take it for what it is. It is a murder mystery. Someone was killed, and Bryce and Hunt are tasked with trying to solve the murder. Think about it like that, and as you read, the fantasy elements will make more sense, and you will understand as you go. If you think too hard about it at the beginning, you're never going to want to finish. But just think of it as a murder mystery that they're trying to solve. And that'll help you get through the first one. And then once you get through the first one, you have to read the second one. And the second one is so good. The ending is so good. And I literally cannot wait for the third one. It's going to be great. So that's my thoughts on these. The second one, I can't really talk about too much because it's a second in a series and anything I say will be a spoiler. So these are both really good. They're both 5 stars. I love Sarah J. Maas. Okay. Next, I have a whole series. I'm going to talk about it once again. I have the Lachlan Feuds series. The first one is The Scarlet Princess, and then Tarnished Crown, then Crimson Kingdom, and then Obsidian Throne. So these are an indie author. They have that classic indie cover of like the matte finish, like, and just like the covers. I mean, they're not great. It's a Kindle Unlimited series, but the series as a whole was 5 stars. I read them on Kindle Unlimited, and then I decided I wanted to have the physical books. Also, look at the side. It makes a crown. Love it. I believe I gave the first 3 4 stars, and then the last one 5 stars. But really, like I said, the whole series is a 5-star series. And it's one of those things. I read the first one, and immediately I needed to read the second one, and I read the first 3 in one day, which is probably a sign of mental illness. But I stayed up way too late into the night finishing the third one because I was at a point where I was like, I just need to know what happens. Like, it's crazy. I think it kind of is, in my mind, I would compare it to Outlander solely because it's like a Scottish fantasy. They wear kilts, they're redheads, it's great. But basically our main character, Rowan, she, in the first book, her and her cousin are captured in the enemy territory. They like snuck across the border to get vodka because they don't have it where they're from. So they snuck across the border to steal some or to buy some and then sneak back. But on the way back, they're captured. And the whole first book is basically, there's like a summit called where all the leaders are of this other territory are going to try and decide what to do with her. Are they going to ransom her? Are they going to kill her? Are they going to let her live? Yada, yada, yada. So that's the first book. And then in the first book, there is a love interest. And it's one of those things, you know, you get that first love interest, but you're like, oh, there's 4 other books. Is this person going to be the final love interest? We get a second kind of interest in the second book, and there's kind of a love triangle, which I don't know. Love triangles are always touch and go, but I liked it in this one. And I love who she ended up with. I think it was amazing. And the guy that she ended up with is just the way he's like so hard and cold to everyone else, but for her, he's like so sweet. It was so good. Like, thinking about them makes me smile. I love the characters. And there's another series that actually comes before this. Like, this one all follows Rowan. So this is like the Rowan series. And then there's another series set in Lachlan as well. Like, this is the Lachlan feud, and the other one's like the Lachlan something else. And it, I believe, follows Rowan's like mom's life, like before Rowan. So it's like her mom, young and trying to navigate everything. So maybe I'll read those because I loved these so much. And it was just so good. So I highly recommend these. They're all in Kindle Unlimited, and it's a 5-star series for me. Next, again, another fantasy. This was like, I just couldn't stop reading fantasy. That was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is going to be 8 fantasies in a row where I was just like, should I read something else? Maybe, but I don't want to. I want to read Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This is the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition. So there was some like extra scenes at the back. I highly recommend getting the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition for these extra scenes because they were so good. And I loved having that extra treat. And I can't wait for the next one to come out. The next one, I believe, is going to be called Reckless, and it comes out in July. So have a little bit to wait for that. But basically, people describe this as like Hunger Games, but I do see it as Hunger Games / the Red Queen. Because if you know the Red Queen, basically like a girl from like the slums is brought, like she saves someone's life, is brought to the attention of the king and queen, and then there's 2 brothers that are kind of like vying for her attention. Ding, ding, ding. That's Peyton in this book. She saves a prince. She is then voted in for these trials, and the trials are where the Hunger Games comes in. Basically, they're competing to the death to win money, honor, all the things that you would win for the Hunger Games. So, like, the trials portion of it is the Hunger Games. The, like, outside of the trials portion of it feels Red Queen-esque. But the reason why she is, like, in the slums is she doesn't have any powers, and basically the king has decreed that ordinaries, people without powers, need to be killed or exiled. And she's an ordinary, she has no powers. and all of the elites have different powers. They could be like fire power, water power, being able to duplicate yourself. There's all different things. And so that is also Red Queen-esque, where they have like powers. Anyway, it was so good. It was like such a good, yeah, it just reminded me of YA dystopian fantasy books that I loved. And it reminded me why I love them. Like, you can't go wrong. I mean, you can, but Lauren did not. And I'm so excited for the next one to come out. This was 5 stars. And I am just very excited to see where this goes. I'm just excited about a lot of books to see where they go. There's just so much potential for a good series. And I'm like loving fantasy, and I'm just, it was good. It was so good. 5 stars. So Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Pick this one up if you haven't. She indie published it and then got picked up by Simon and Schuster. So she's a TikToker. I love her. Next, we have By a Thread by Lucy Score. This is when I exited my fantasy phase and entered my romance phase. And now I have been reading lots of romance. But I've read a few Lucy Score books by now. They're almost all on Kindle Unlimited. And she's like republishing them with new covers because she got picked up by Bloom before she was just indie published. And people have said that this is their favorite Lucy Score book, but like, this is a thick as heck book for a romance. Like, it's almost 600 pages, and that's absurd for like what should be like a fluffy romance. But let me tell you, all 600 pages of this were good. I love Dominic. I love Allie. Dominic is, he's great. He's a great book boyfriend. And the way he treats Allie is so good. And it's, I would say, along the lines, if you think of The Devil Wears Prada, that's kind of like the vibes that this book gives. Except instead of Miranda Priestly, I mean, there is a Miranda Priestly-esque character, but Dominic works at the fashion magazine, and Allie is his assistant, and it's so good. So, I believe I gave this book 4 stars. I did. This is 4 stars for By a Thread. So, if you're looking for like a good spicy romance, really Lucy Score will always write a spicy romance, but this was an especially good one. Her other ones, I would say, is like, sure, read them, like they're usually 3 stars for me, but this was especially good. So, and then the final book that I read that I physically have is Betting on You by Lynn Painter. This is her YA new release. If you don't know, I love Lynn Painter. These are her other books, Better Than the Movies and The Do-Over, which I have both read. I have read both of those, and they are both 5 stars. And I got the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition of this one and read it in one day. It's so good. Again, this main character's name is also Charlie, right? I read a few books with Charlie as main characters, but Charlie is the MMC, and Bailey is the FMC, and basically it's not really like When Harry Met Sally, but it has that same vibe of like can guys and girls just be friends? And the bet that they make is that Charlie thinks, obviously, guys and girls can't just be friends, and Bailey says they can. They make a bet about two people that they work with, that they will, if they will get together or if they can just stay friends. So that's kind of like the original premise, but then Charlie and Bailey start hanging out a lot because Bailey's parents, both of their parents are divorced, and Bailey's mom is dating someone and she wants Charlie's help to break them up. And so there's a little bit of a fake dating scheme in there to like get them to break up. But Charlie is just, again, he's such a good book boyfriend. Like, he drops everything to help Bailey. Does he make mistakes? Yes. Does he have things to work through? Yes. But when it comes to Bailey, he's really good. Very sweet. And this was 5 stars. I love Lynn Painter. If you're looking for a sweet rom-com, no spice, obviously it's YA, I would recommend any of Lynn Painter's books. She has obviously all of these YA books, but then also she has 3 like new adult books that I have also read, which are Mr. Wrong Number, The Love Wager, and Accidentally Amy. Accidentally Amy is independently published. She published it, I think, before she got picked up. But all 3 of those are also top tier. And if you want a little bit more spice, those are, those are more up your alley. So those are all the books that I physically read. Then I also have books that I read on my Kindle. First, I read Abby's Cowboy Care by Kimberly Cray. I've talked about these in the past month. These are like Christian romances that I read growing up, and she has been like writing some more. They're terrible. These are like 2 stars, but I will continue to read them just because it like holds a special place in my heart of like, these are the romance books that I read when I first was getting into romance. But the whole premise of the whole series is that it's like witness protection. So these girls, something has happened to them and they need a place to stay where they feel safe. And that's where they go to this ranch in Wyoming where these strong cowboys will take care of them. And that's the premise in every single book. And there's really not much else to say. It's like 2 stars. Next, I have Never Met a Duke Like You by Amelie. Howard. And this is me getting back into my historical romance era. I read 2 historical romances this month. I go through phases, but I went through a phase where I was reading tons of historical romance and I have not read any in a while. And then next thing you know, a few of the like series that I have been reading all are coming out with next books in the series at once. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is a new one in this series. This is a new one. And it's kind of hard with historical romance. They're all kind of the same. There's differences, obviously, in some of them. There are differences. But I do think when I'm reading all these different series, I get them confused. I get them mixed up. So I have to like go back and be like, what was this one about? Oh, and now I can read the next one. So anyway, I read 2 continuations of series, and one of those was Never Met a Duke Like You. And this was kind of like, in the synopsis, it calls it like Clueless, but a historical romance. And it's like childhood friends to enemies to lovers. It was great. And I gave it 4 stars. So, and the series, the first one in the series I listened to on audiobook, and it was also very good. So I recommend. Next, I read Defiant Heart by Brayton Walsh. I saw a clip for one of the books in this series on TikTok, but it ended up being like the third book in the series, and so I was like, oh, I'll read the first one and then make my way to that one where I saw like one out of context quote. And so I'll read this whole series just so I can get to that book. But kind of stupid, but whatever. I read Defiant Heart. It was spicy. He was a cop, which I don't usually love, but I read it anyway. And she is like a hippie, and they're like enemies to lovers because she's like trying to save the trees and protesting, and he has to arrest her, and like, but there's all this chemistry. It was 3 stars. It was okay. I wouldn't be like, yes, read it, but like, fine. Next, I read Never Wager with a Wallflower, and this was another one of my historical romances in a series, and this is the final one in a series actually, which is the Merrywell sister series. Each book follows a different sister. This was the final sister, and she's like bookish, and he is like a businessman. I guess it's enemies to lovers, but what I liked about this is there's no third act breakup. There's like a first act breakup. Like they kind of have like a moment, and then something happens, and then for the rest of the book he's like trying to like grovel. We love groveling. Make it up to her, get back on her good side, and that's like most of the second half of the book. So I appreciate that there's no third act breakup. Cheers to Virginia Heath for doing that. And this was, let's see, what did I give it? 3 stars. Also this month I read Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Falling in Love, which is in fact a Hermione fanfiction on AO3, but it is on Goodreads. Like you can mark it as read on Goodreads, so I did. And this is a 5-star fanfiction for me. I don't read too much fanfiction, honestly, but I do love Hermione fanfiction, and this one is so well done, and it's not super dark, which I'm debating reading Manacled. If you have read Manacled, please let me know, because I'm debating on reading it. But I just think it's well done. It deals with like the trauma from the war that they both have, and they're just so good together, and Draco is so hot. So if you're into fan fiction, if you're into Harry Potter, if you're into Hermione, this one is so good. So I highly recommend. And then the last 2 books I read are in a hockey series by Megan Quinn. I read Right Man, Right Time and Those 3 Little Words, which are actually the second and third in a series. I skipped the first one and I read the third one first, and then I went to the second one. I'm reading them all out of order, but it's one of those, it's like an interconnected standalone. It does not matter what order you read them in, but it's like all friends on the same hockey team that are doing relationships. So the first one I read was Right Man, Right Time, and that one is age gap, fake dating, and basically our FMC Ollie, she goes up to a guy at a bar and is like, pretend to kiss me, I'm trying to make my ex jealous, and it turns out to be Silas, who is a hockey player who is 10 years older than her. She's 21, she's still in school, and he's 31 and he's a professional hockey player. She does not know who he is, and basically he is like, you owe me for helping you out, so in exchange will you go to some events with me to make my ex-girlfriend back off? She says yes, and that's the premise of that. But it's Megan Quinn. It's spicy. So keep that in mind. And then I read Those Three Little Words, which is accidental pregnancy. I know some people don't like accidental pregnancy. I actually don't mind accidental pregnancy, like when that's the premise of the book. When the accidental pregnancy is like at the beginning and the rest of the book deals with that. I don't like accidental pregnancy when it comes towards the end of the book and it's just like a plot device to like either break them up or get them back together. I want it to be at the beginning of the book, and that's the whole plot of the book, is like the pregnancy and them dealing with it. That's how Out on a Limb was, and that's how this book was, and I think that's the only and the best way to do accidental pregnancy. And when it's done like that, and it's done well, I really like it. So Those Three Little Words is, again, one of the other hockey players on the team, and its best friend's sister, accidental pregnancy. So good. And I loved Those Three Little Words. Eli, he was such a good MMC. But both of those got 3 stars for me. So, those are all of the books that I read in November. I read 22 books, which is a lot, but I did have Thanksgiving break where I was not working and I had more free time, but I still read a lot this month. And I am looking forward to December, to reading some really good books, and I will see you somewhere else on the internet. Bye, guys.